Welcome everyone to Loudoun Agile Network. Our guest speaker for tonight is Stephen. Stephen is an enterprise Agile coach. He is a wonderful trainer. He's an emotional intelligence trainer. He has 21 years of experience, and he is going to present today about how to incorporate OCM into Agile transformation. So I'll hand over the floor to Stephen. Looking forward to hear your insights.
Thank you very much, Anju, and good evening, everyone. My name is Stephen Omojuyigbe. I'd like to first thank Anju and Toby for having me. I do not take it as a privilege. I mean, I take it as a privilege. I do not take it for granted. And so thank you very much. Little bit about me. I'm an enterprise agile coach. I'm with CGI. Before then, I was with Lightspeed. I was a senior scrum master at seconded to a bank. Now, I've had about 24 years project management experience, half of which was in traditional waterfall, and half of which has been as an agilist. Now, between those two experiences, I did try to start a software as a service business myself. And I'm always excited to announce that it failed woefully. Really, it was a colossal failure. But it was while I was debriefing the failure of that enterprise, of course, that I found Agile, because we were trying to build that business waterfall. And it failed because before we could launch the product, the requirements had totally changed. Stories I'm sure you have heard before. I tell you that to underscore my passion for Agile, and as I self-describe myself, an Agile evangelist. And so if I sound like I'm preaching Agile to you today, that's where it's coming from. So don't blame me for it, blame my experiences. All right. Today, we're talking about how to enhance your Agile transformation with the power of OCM, that is organizational change management. And I'm going to be speaking to you from some work done by ProSci. I'm also a ProSci certified change management practitioner. And like I was introduced, I'm an emotional intelligence trainer. And so I always really want to talk about the people side of Agile transformation. Our agenda for today is a little ambitious, but it's not something that we cannot cover. I tend to speak too much, so it is possible we don't get to the end of the agenda, but it's really not, the goal is not to get through the end of the agenda. It's just to introduce some of these ideas to you and kind of get you moving in the direction of thinking about it and doing some more research. So I will not assume that we all know what change management is, so we'll define it. And then we'll talk about the business case for change management on Agile transformation projects. Then we'll briefly talk about the key reason why Agile coaches struggle to achieve adoption of new Agile practices across teams and programs. And then we'll look at how to make change personal using the ADCAR model developed by ProSci. And then we're looking at the various aspects of change. And then finally, I hope to leave you with some top 10 lessons for managing resistance. Before we get into it, I want to quickly ask, what in your experience has been the most critical element to success in Agile transformation? We're going to have a conversation for a couple of minutes. And the question is really, in your experience as an Agilist, as someone who has led or participated in Agile transformation, either in the private sector or the government sector, if you were to point to one or two things that are critical to the success of this transformation, what would that be? You can unmute yourself and speak up, which I will really enjoy to hear your voice, or you can just put something in the chat for me. By the way, as I make the presentation tonight, you can interrupt me at any time. I really encourage and welcome that, to ask a question or maybe to share something that you think is really powerful that others can learn from. And if you want to wait until the end of the presentation to ask your questions, that is also fine. If you want to put them in the chat while I'm speaking, that is also fine. Andrew and Toby are monitoring the chat, and they will let me know if you have something there. But right now, I wanted to just talk about, and I see your hand, Dave. What in your experience has been the most critical success element when we talk about the Agile transformation? Dave?
Good work ethics.
Good work ethics. That's a good one.
And transparency.
Transparency. That's a very good one. Thank you so much, Dave.
Anybody
else?
In the chat, I see from Vaishali, culture change, from Frank, communications, from Toby, accountability.
Culture change, accountability, and what else did you say, Andrew?
Communications, culture change, accountability. Karthik says vision. And folks, feel free to unmute yourself and speak. So two options, please. Either unmute yourself and speak or put it in the chat, whatever works.
Number one thing that I see is to have the highest level of management support and belief of this transformation, because if you don't have that, it will never get done.
Very true.
Leadership buy-in.
In fact, that, Dave, is underscored very seriously by ProSci research, that when you are sponsorship from the highest echelons of the project, of the program, or the organization, you do have a greater chance that the project will succeed. That is very, very true. Can we do we have one more contribution? All right. I think there are very many elements to success for an Agile transformation work. And which ones are most important will definitely depend on the context for the organization, the Agile maturity of the organization, the size of the organization, the type of project, and so many other things. I have seen projects that are successful because of a deep understanding of how to create change in culture. I've seen projects that are also successful because there were very good guardrails for accountability that were defined. But I will say this to you, that in all my years of being an agilist, I think that managing the people aspect of the change, and that is broad, I know, but managing the people aspect of the change is probably the most important element to successful Agile transformation. And that is very simple to understand, because organizations change when people change. It's as simple as that. It is the cumulative effect or the cumulative change in people that lead to organizational change. And therefore, having a framework and having a focus on those people who need to change and how they are changing, in my opinion, is very, very important as Agilists and people who lead Agile transformation work. However, this presentation today is not a full conversation on organizational change management or even leading or driving people change. All I want to do tonight is just share some ideas with you to probably make the compelling argument that as Agilists and as leaders who lead Agile transformations, we need to pay attention to organizational change management. And if possible, to have formal change management strategies put in place. But even when there is no formal change management framework, we can incorporate, and this is very vital, incorporate some of the organizational change management ideas that I will share into our normal Agile transformation roadmap or conversations. For example, if you're coaching a Scrum Master, if you understand the different levels of change adoption that I'm going to share with in a minute, called the ADCAR model, you can determine where that Scrum Master is as far as changing is concerned. And using that model, you can craft a coaching conversation that addresses exactly where that Scrum Master is. So you might not have a formal change management strategy or framework put in place, but you can take some of the elements of change management that I'm going to be sharing, and some that you are definitely going to discover yourself, and incorporate it into your work. So let's get started. I'm going to run through this slide, and we're going to be done in about 20 minutes. So change management is an enabling framework for managing the people side of change, right? An enabling framework for managing the people side of change. Like I said, organizations change when people change. So we have to be deliberate about the people side of change. Unfortunately, or interestingly, most of the Agile frameworks that we work with, whether the very light frameworks like Scrum or Kanban, or the heavier ones for scaling, most of them are heavy on the process side of things. And it's very important that the processes are gotten right. But if you have just the processes, and the process side of the change, the technical process side of the change, without the people process side of the change, the research says that you probably are going to have less level of success than you should. So successful change requires both technical and people sides. And when I say technical side, I don't mean technological, even though in some transformation projects that will be important also. But for this conversation, when I say technical, I mean the Agile Transformation work, the Agile Transformation agenda. That is what I mean by technical here, because we have to design it, whether as Agile coaches or as Agile leaders, we have to develop it and then deliver it. But then the people side of that work also will require that people engage with what we designed and develop and delivering at the top, adopt and use it. Say, for example, you introduce the idea of a retrospective. That will be the technical process to Agile transformation that you design, develop, and deliver. But if your engineers, who, by the way, I think are the most neglected people when it comes to Agile transformation, in my opinion, we overcoach Scrum Masters and product owners and all those roles, and we really do very little for the engineers. We also do very little for the leaders, and these two sides are critical to transformation success. But that's another conversation. But the engineers, for example, they need to understand what the retrospective is. They need to engage with it. They need to adopt it. They need to use it. And so if you only deliver the process side and you did not thoroughly, intentionally think about the people's engagement, adoption, and usage side, your formula for success will only have only one side to it. The formula for success when it comes to transformation is that you must have a robust technical side that was well thought through, that aligns with the reality and the context in which it's going to be delivered. And you also need to have a people side that was well thought through, that is delivered, that produces adoption at the gut level for the people. If you mix that with a compelling reason for change, you have a powerful success formula when it comes to any kind of transformation work, for that matter. Now, this is one of the pro-sci statistics that I find really, really, really compelling. The data shows that when you have an OCM strategy in place, you improve the likelihood of your change outcomes by as much as 6 times. Let me repeat that. When you have an OCM strategy in place, you improve the likelihood of your change outcomes by 3 to 6 times. that is a compelling argument, if you ask me. The fact that when we don't have an OCM strategy in place, the possibility of success is reduced 3 to 6 times is something every Agile practitioner, anyone involved in any kind of change work, really needs to pay attention to. All right? So the research shows that consistently organizations with excellent change management strategies achieve much greater success, all right, in their change management work. But when we talk about success, we're not just talking about success generally. We're talking about specifics in terms of costs. We're talking in terms of impact, not just on project outcomes, but on timelines, on budgets, on quality, which are the critical things we all want to see in our change management work. The first chart you see right now shows that 81% of the projects surveyed were on or under budget with excellent change management, as against 48 with poor change management strategies in place. That is double success rate you have with being on budget when you have OCM strategies in place. Now, if that is not a compelling data, I wonder what else can be a compelling data. The second chart shows that 71% of the projects surveyed were on or ahead of schedule with excellent change management, as against only 14%. Only 14% that were on schedule with poor change management. Again, I would like to suggest that these numbers are compelling and we should not ignore them. And when you think about it, and as I go in presentation, you see that when you think about it, a lack of proper OCM strategy is the reason, probably the most critical reason, some of our change work is not succeeding. Now, let's move on and talk about the key reason why Agile coaches struggle to achieve adoption of new Agile practices across teams and programs. And again, we are going to look at some results from the surveys done by ProSci. You know, many Agile transformation work are structured such that Agile coaches, guys like me, maybe Andrew, Toby, and maybe some of you on this call, we are saddled with ensuring the success of Agile transformation work. I don't know about your experience, but my experience bears really well or corresponds really well with ProSci research that it does not work. And why? The research tells us that people managers are the key, or are the people most important when it comes to carrying the message of transformation or change. The research overwhelmingly shows that people are more likely to dance to the sound of change when their managers are the ones beating the drums. Agile coaches struggle, and they will continue to struggle because they are the wrong people carrying the right message. The impetus to change reduces significantly when the change message, I beg your pardon, is not carried by someone we trust. And our personal experiences can bear this out. When the change message is not carried by someone we trust and someone we're accountable to, there are two key things here that people managers bring that, except the Agile coach is also the one directly managing the staff, those two things are going to be missing. Number one is trust, and number two is accountability. I think what Toby that said earlier, that accountability is critical for success. But when you parachute in an Agile coach, maybe from one department of the organization to another, or was from totally outside the organization, and you parachute them into teams and into programs, and they are the ones communicating changes. But the people managers, the people that are responsible for the careers of the people we're trying to get to adopt change, don't say anything about agility. In fact, some of them report to non-agilists. You have Scrum Masters in the organizational chart who report to non-agilists, who do not set any kind of agile expectations during expectation setting. And we expect them to really adopt change. The research says it doesn't work. Because people trust their managers. In fact, there's some kind of, in many places, especially when you have good managers, some kind of unholy relationship, quote and unquote, now going on. Maybe unholy is not the word, but some kind of intimate relationship. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to say it's a bad thing. Going on between people managers and the people that report to them. There's a bond there. There's a relationship there that allows trust, that allows open communication, that allows accountability, that allows the managers to call the BS of their people that no agile coach will ever have. And that's why we continue to struggle.
This all comes back to the to what I was talking about in the beginning, that you have to have the management buy-in and the support.
Mm-hmm. You do have to have the management buy-in. You do have to have the support. But you also have to have them not just buying in, not just supporting, actively being the ones on the forefront of carrying the message to the people on the front line. So if agile coaches are to succeed at all, they're better working with people managers and coaching and training the people managers to go and coach and train their people. All right. And the research says that they are the preferred centers because employees trust them. They are close to where the change happens. They help to mitigate resistance. Like I said earlier, they can call the BS of their people that agile coaches can now. And they can really build the support that the people need to adopt the changes.
Mr. O?
Yes, please.
So about the why, also another reason why managers are also important. One, they know if the managers gain a lot of work experience and they have faced so many difficult situations where employees are new to this. This reminds me of challenge the process model. Reminds me of them taking the initiative, taking the risk to stand up to the unknown part where they have done before so that they can protect their employees from severe endangerment.
Very true. And think about the disadvantages an agile coach who's parachuted from one other part of the organization into the project team, the disadvantages we have when it comes to carrying change, and the advantages the people managers have that we're not leveraging. And you find that you have to have a thorough think through about these things and put a strategy in place to leverage those advantages the managers have.
Many times I think what you'll find is the reason why they're bringing in people to do these transformations is because most of the people in the organization, including the managers, don't have the agile experience to bring it about. And so they're probably uncomfortable taking a leadership role in an area where they're not either very experienced or have, maybe even no experience. And I've often found that, as is typical, just a memo that goes out over the email saying, this is so-and-so, they are being brought in to, usually you want one person in charge of it. And this is so-and-so, they are in charge of the Agile Transformation. I ask you to welcome them and to know that they are given my full support in this transformation. And that one memo alone could make such a percentage-wise huge difference in getting people on board. You know, if management doesn't do things like that, then a lot of the people who are resistant to change are going to take advantage of that vacuum, right? You never want vacuums are always bad because someone's always going to fill it, and it's not always good who fills it. So you want to make sure there is no vacuum. And if they put out a message like that and advertise in such a way, then, you know, hopefully that vacuum doesn't get filled by the resistance movements that could be running around, such as people in waterfall for 10, 20, 30 years who have no interest at all in doing agile.
Very, very well said. Very, very well said. And I'm going to add to that sending such an email is the least you want these managers to do.
That's really like the minimum.
Yes, the very minimum. Because if you think about what they've just said, and if one email can have such an exponential difference, imagine what sitting in the room during the meeting, participating in the training, asking questions. Really, because when we say managers have to be engaged, what does that really mean? It means sitting in the room during the training, asking questions, really getting involved. And as you're going to see later, it goes beyond that. It involves creating and working on other elements within the organizational structure to speak the same language. But sending them an email, that will be the minimum. But if you can just get that alone done, like he said, you're going to have incredible change. So this is a very important point, that if that's all we talk about today, and you are able to walk through this. I've been in transformation projects where managers are actively, maybe not actively, but subtly sabotaging the work. Not because they don't want the work to succeed, but because they feel that their powers are being eroded. So part of these all getting managers involved is to be able to sound them out and to allay their fears. Now, we're going to talk about that in more detail. If we ever get that, I told you at the beginning, I have a tendency to talk too much. Let's try and move on now.
Mr. O?
Yes, please.
Do you have 2 minutes so I can make
Please.
another one comment? So on the can we go back to the last slide, the previous one? You know, the last point when they said they build support for managers, this also indicates that emotional intelligence is also part of this support, because this, you know, when you're monitoring people based on their well-beings and then their level of emotions, whenever they need to feel more welcomed into the roles of their job, this helps managers to know how they're doing or whether this job fits them or not.
Very, very well said. You know,
I have often found to add to that, by the way, that's actually a good point. But I have found, adding to that the best way to go along with these things, because of all of the challenges that I spoke about before, is to make that manager your ally and to realize that they're bringing you in because they probably don't know how to do it. So to sort of subtly educate them and train them. So maybe to meet with them at a minimum of, like, let's say twice a week for, 45 minutes or an hour, and not only provide them with like a high level status of how things are doing, but during that meeting to assess on each of them how much Agile or Scrum or Kanban knowledge they have. And as you make that assessment and you realize where the deficiencies are, to subtly explain things to them. And, I recently discussed this with somebody very high up in the Agile community. And, we both came to the conclusion, and it's really there's no secret here. The emphasis really shouldn't be on Scrum. The emphasis should be on the outcomes that Scrum can provide. So a lot of people get wrapped up in the Scrum. And that's the reason I think why so much of it fails, is because people look at it from a procedural standpoint rather than using it as a vehicle to get you to where you need to be, which is the business outcome, or let's call it the value stream that SAFe talks about. Everything should be built around value streams. So don't think about it as Scrum. Think about it as value streams, and Scrum is just helping you to get there.
Very true. And if I was to make comments on that, the rest of my time is going to be spent on that. So we're going to move on. But you're very correct. I think everybody in the Agile community can definitely agree on the benefits of doing Agile. Nobody really can argue against customer centricity, faster time to the market, rates reduction in rates of defect. Nobody can argue against that. We all want that. And where we begin to argue is when we start to talk about how to get there, which is where all the arguments around where should you be doing Scrum or Kanban or SAFe, should you even do any of that? That's where those arguments come from. But I think, and this is very important, the reason why we have those arguments is because we miss the first part of this whole continuum before you get the benefits, and then before you do the practices, is that do we even understand the principles that drive some of those practices? And when we coach, when we train, when we do transformation work, we skip over training on principle. I had that experience today. I was running a training. So I said, let's skip over about this. Let's get into the practices. I said, oh, that's exactly why you have a problem. Because when we don't become Agile, which is when you imbibe those practices, which allows you to customize your frameworks, or not adopt a framework at all, or totally create a new framework. When you skip over the being part and you jump into the doing part, you're going to have all kinds of arguments. But I want to move on real quick here, because I know I have 5 more minutes, because there's still some good stuff that I want to share with you. So take note of this slide, because this gives you 5 critical things you should make sure your managers are doing for you. Let them be your mouthpiece wherever possible. You will achieve much better training the manager and getting the manager to train the people wherever possible. Of course, with the skill gap they have in mind, but anytime the manager can help you be the communicator, take advantage of that. You don't need to be seen. Let them be a liaison between you and the teams, wherever they cannot be the actual communicator. Make sure they are the advocate for the changes you're promoting. Let them be your assistance manager, and then coach them to coach the people. When you put these strategies in place, you will have between 3 to 6 times greater success in your Agile transformation work. That's what the research shows. And I think as Agilists, we need to start paying more attention to research than our own opinions. There's a lot of my opinion going on in the Agile world, and we have not become as research-driven as we should be. And this is based on research, and I hope we pay attention to it. Now, moving on, and I'm going to jump this because we don't have time. The ADCA model is very important for determining where an individual is when it comes to the adoption of the change and what you should be doing, because different people on the programs, different managers will have or will be at different points along the journey. So, for example, awareness is when you hear from the person, why are we doing this? What is going on here? What if we don't? Those are the triggers that shows you that this person has not really understood the purpose for the change. It's different from someone who is asking, what is in it for me? What do I get out of this? Why is the organization wanting me to do this? The challenge here is a desire to participate and support the change. It's also different from someone who is asking the question, what training do I need to go to? And when should I do this and when should I not do this? That's someone who probably is already aware of the need for change, has a desire to change, but has a knowledge gap on how to change. Then it's also different from someone who is asking, can you give me, can I shadow someone who is doing this? Can you watch me do this and give me feedback? That person is on the ability point in the continuum where he is trying to implement required skills and behavior. So when you're speaking to, say, a Scrum Master, or even one of the managers we've talked about, and you have this greed as you have the coaching conversation with them, you can determine where this person is on this journey, because you cannot take them to the next level if they don't overcome the barriers in the level before that. You cannot create desire for someone who does not have awareness. You cannot get someone into ability who has no desire. And so oftentimes we think that the only way, or the most important way, or the most effective way to deal with resistance is to conduct a training. But a training will only give knowledge. But you cannot use training to solve motivational problems. You cannot use training to deal with attitudinal problems. You can use training to deal with knowledge gaps and ability challenges, but you cannot use training to solve awareness problems. I mean, you communicate, but you cannot use the typical Scrum training, save today certification. Those are what I mean when I say training. That's not how you overcome awareness and desire challenges. And so there are two things here. To be able to have a grid to determine where the individual is in the change journey, and to use that awareness to craft the appropriate strategy for moving the person along. And these will be different from person to person, from team to team, and from programs to programs. But it's an important thing to understand about leading and executing successful change transformation projects. Next couple of slides kind of goes into detail in the outcome model. I'm going to jump through that just to show you that different people will be on different levels in that transformation journey, in the adoption journey, and you have to conversationally determine where each person is, and then to craft your coaching strategy and your coaching conversation, or whatever engagement you're having with the person, to address exactly where they are. Because if Kavita is struck on desire, what you're going to do with Kavita is going to be different from Alana, who is stuck on knowledge. That's how you use this outcome model at a very, very simple level to walk through and to push forward your transformation agendas. Next couple of slides. I mean, this slide talks about what happens when some of the elements that I just showed you are missing. Without awareness and desire, what you see is people asking the same questions over and over again. And how many times have you seen that happen? Like, you conduct a training today, 1 month later, you do the same training and people are asking the same questions. And 6 months later, you do the same training and people are asking the same questions. The problem is there's no awareness and there is no desire. And so your training is not getting through. You need to stop training and you need to do something else. And then without awareness and desire, you see lower productivity and higher turnover hoarding of resources and information, and delays in implementation. Without knowledge and ability, you will see lower utilization or incorrect usage of new systems. In this case, incorrect usage of new processes or events or whatever it is that we're introducing as part of the Agile transformation. Employees worry whether they can be successful in the future. Greater impact on customers and partners, sustained reduction in productivity. And when there is no reinforcement, you find that people, like a rubber band, they expand 1 minute and contract the next minute. They constantly are reverting back to old ways. And then the organization creates a history of poorly managed change. And people say, Agile does not work. Agile works.
Mr. O? Mr. O?
Yes, please.
On the last part, when it states on the reinforcement section consequences, when the first point says employees revert back to old ways of doing work, this means that they're not open-minded to make innovations in their methods of work. They're just keeping the same routine, which can be very boring in the organization, and people will find that they will not want to interact more because they wouldn't learn anything if they keep doing the same thing over again.
Very true. So as a change, go ahead, please.
So I found that one of the most important things is if you can afford one, to set up a lean agile center of excellence run by, let's say at the very top of it, one very expert agile coach who really knows their stuff. And then everybody reports to that person, and all of the training emanates from that direction. And so you speak with one voice to the entire organization. I have found that training in general doesn't work because as soon as you get out of the training, you forget unless you start reinforcing it. So the difference is, starting out by doing agile and then becoming agile. When I started out as a Scrum Master, I was very frustrated because I would speak with my team about things and I just felt like they didn't care or they didn't want to do it. And I spoke with an agile coach about it, and this individual had said to me, do you know it can take up to 30 to 32 times of telling somebody something before it actually gets through? And my question was, are you joking? Like, are you exaggerating that? And the person told me, no, I'm not. I'm totally serious. You could talk to somebody 30 to 32 times before they finally get the message. And so I realized that it's very important to be patient and just to know that you are going to have to constantly reinforce things. People on the team have different levels of expertise. They have different job things that they do, different roles. And again, it comes down to the difference of starting out by doing agile and then being agile. So you'll go through all of the events, and in most cases, you're going to be sitting there, especially if you've never seen it, and you have no idea what's going on. But as you go through sprint after sprint after sprint, it will slowly sink in, not only how to do it, but eventually the light will turn on and you'll understand why it's being done and why it's a part of Scrum. And that is when you become being agile instead of doing agile.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's move on. I was going to make some comments, but let's move on because of time. I want to make sure I get through some of this stuff. Now, as a takeaway, I want to just quickly look at this next slide, which I think is one major reason Agile transformation struggle. I started my career in organizational development consulting. So I kind of knew this by training, But when I saw the ProSci research that bore it out, it became really, really something I wanted everybody to know. And that simple idea is that you have to take a system view of change. Change does not happen by you pushing change only on one level. Oftentimes, when you look at the right-hand side of what you see on the screen, that's where Agile Transformation work focuses on. We start with processes. We move around the processes. We move around meetings. We introduce new ceremonies. And then we create new systems and we give them Jira, we give them tools. And we change their names from project manager to product manager and change their names from project support to Scrum Master, whatever. And then we demand critical behaviors. And that's where we end. But the rest of the organization and the rest of the processes, the culture, does not support the change we're asking or requesting. In fact, sometimes the rest, everything else on the right-hand side, negates everything on the right, and everything on the left-hand side negates what's on the right-hand side. I'll give you a couple of examples. I mentioned one earlier. You have a reporting structure where Agilists, Scrum Masters, Agile developers are reporting to recovering waterfallics, is what I call them, or waterfallics. Now, so there is expectation setting, there is performance management, all of that goes around with the reporting structure that do not support the things we have done on the right-hand side. So we're not setting expectations that include Agile behaviors for the Scrum Master. What does that tell the Scrum Master about his job? It tells him this stuff is not important. A Scrum Master comes to the end of the year and it's, some people say we do ongoing reviews. Whatever cadence you do your review, Scrum Master comes to a review time and time again, and nobody raises the conversation around the critical behaviors that we want from him as a Scrum Master that are in line with Agile principles. What does that tell the Scrum Master? This stuff is not important. So mindsets, attitudes, and beliefs, reporting structure, performance review, compensation structure, and location might no longer be relevant because of the pandemic and people working from home today, but the whole organization has to support the new behaviors that we're expecting. And sometimes, even the things on the right, we don't do well enough. We try to subsume Agile practices and processes, still demanding the traditional, still making demands based on traditional project management approach on the same people that we're making demands, Agile demands on. So we still expect people to write status reports. And I do understand for those who work with government, sometimes those things are in the contract and you have to do them, they're in your SLA. But we still expect people to write status reports, but then we're preaching transparency using the Kanban boards for understanding where we are in the project. What does that tell the people? Either the status report is not important, or this tool I'm being asked to use is not important. The least we can do when we're constrained to have those kind of conflicting practices is to explain why we have to do them and let the people understand what is important. So when you, as an Agile coach, as an Agile leader, are building and developing a transformation agenda, you cannot just focus on ceremonies and practices and tools. You have to think in terms of all the aspects of a person's job and how all of those aspects have to support the agile behaviors and the direction you're requesting the people to go. Because of
By
time,
the
I'm
way,
going to move on.
that's an interesting challenge. Is having, let's say, agile coaches and scrum masters being involved in their teams, individuals, things like performance reviews, but also trying to gain their trust.
Yeah, I hear you there. It's a challenge. And I remember every single time I'm asked to participate in such things, I say, I'm going to lose the trust of these folks. I need to be able to coach them. You cannot have me reporting on their performance. So I definitely get what you're saying. And what's the solution to that?
Have you ever seen a manager that was a scrum master, by the way?
I have.
So have I.
I have. In fact, my present manager used to be a scrum master. And so, and it's interesting that you bring that out. It's possible, but I think the industry has matured to where we should have managers now who have an history of being agilist.
Right? So the biggest problem, right? I mean, this is so, obvious, is you have devs, right? And the devs, we all need help, right? So you want to start asking people for help on your team, and there's your scrum master and there's the other devs. But then as the scrum master and let's say the lead dev, you have to report on their performance to their managers. So therein lies the challenge of getting the work done, building the trust, and reporting on them when it comes to like their performance reviews. This is like a major challenge.
It is a major challenge, and there are ideas on how you can deal with it. After all, before Agile, it used to be done. People used to report to their managers who used to support their work. It's all about how you build that layer of trust. And Andrew just showed our face on camera, which is my cue to start to wrap up. And I'll try and do that in 2 minutes. And with that, I'll just leave you with these quick tips on how to deal with resistances. Because as Agilists and as Agile coaches, we are constantly experiencing some of these. We're constantly experiencing pushbacks and resistance. I think the first one, and that's the only one I probably will talk about, is the most important one. I remember having a senior manager who was very disruptive to one of the teams I was coaching. And she would come and ask irrelevant questions and undo the directions I gave them. And she was just a problem. And then I decided to have a one-on-one with her and ask her what she really needs from the team. And she went on and told me, I am responsible for delivery. I am responsible if these things fail or do not fail. You cannot tell me not to be that intimately involved because I am ultimately accountable. And in that one conversation, I was able to uncover very valid, very, very valid arguments and desire from her as to why she was constantly interfering. My initial thought was, she just doesn't like Agile. She's just resisting Agile. She just wants control. But then my emotional intelligence training kicked in, which says, never judge, always delay judgment. What you see is not all that there is. Go and see if you can uncover some. So that's what I did. And by uncovering our valid desires and needs, I was able to show her how she can have all those needs met without interfering with the team. Oh, you want accountability? This is how you can get it. The demo is a critical meeting for you to attend. This is what you can get there. This is how you can go about it. And I was able to show her how The agile processes have already provided for the things she needed. And she didn't need to constantly be in DSUs and be disrupted. And to be honest with you and to be really, really transparent, she changed. And she that used to be very antagonistic towards the Scrum Master became the #1 supporter of the Scrum Master. What's the point? Many times when we're experiencing resistance, it's not that people are bad. I don't think anybody comes to work as a professional and come in, they thought, I'm just going to be a problem today. I'm just going to sabotage this agile team. I'm just going to get in their faces and I'm going to make them miserable. I don't think anybody ever does that. Most objections and resistance have their roots in some unspoken needs and expectation. And as someone who is emotionally intelligent and someone who is trained as a coach, you want to listen first and foremost. Understand those objections, elicit them in the conversation, and speak to with transparency and courage.
One-on-ones are some of the best ways to actually get challenges fixed. It might even be the #1 way to deal with it, especially in the situation that you just brought up. However, like causing anxiety to the group isn't going to get the work done any better. I think in general, in that specific case, what the person needs to understand is how to manage management expectations on delivery, because I think what happens is a lot of managers get upset that they may miss deliveries. And
yes.
If upper management understood what the sort of guardrails on the actual delivery were, like explaining to them things like velocity and how much we can get done, and then that traveled all the way up to the top, then I think there would be less anxiety. But I think people try to promise more than they're capable of, and that causes anxiety, and that gets pushed all the way down to the teams. And with all that anxiety, less work gets done. So it's better to manage the expectations up front and to explain and say, hey, we have a brand new team. We don't know what their velocity is yet. We're going to see over several sprints what the average is. We can use Monte Carlo to determine in the future. And then this is on average what we can deliver, but we can't go any more than that. So you have to prioritize.
Hey Dave, great points. I'm sorry to intervene, but we are really coming towards almost beyond 8 o'clock. So I would like to have Stephen really quickly finish his presentation. Sorry to intervene. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. You have great points, but I do want to bring the session back on time, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Stephen,
No
thank you, Dave. Yeah, no worries. And I promised Stephen that if he talks too much, I will appear on the screen so that he knows it's time. But thank you, Dave. Steve, back to you. I would like to maybe reserve a few minutes for questions in the end. But I would also like to request Anju to, as soon as you're done, Stephen, to come and at least do the vote of thanks and close the session. But then, Stephen, if you want to hang out for a few more minutes for questions, that'll be awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Let me just leave you with this charge. If you're an Agilist, Scrum Master, Delivery Manager, you need to understand that with excellent change management, your employees will adopt change faster, more completely and more proficiently. They will stay engaged in the organization during disruptive change. Because they will understand why the change is happening, and they will have the time and tools to get on board and feel heard and supported. And if you apply the principles of change management during and after a project, a project can go a long way in helping you achieve the desired results. So I ask you, imagine a world where all Agile coaches are also skilled change practitioners. the good we can do for the companies we serve. And so what will you do? And that's the challenge I want to leave you with. What will you do from today to make sure that you are improving not only your agile skills, but your change management skills and ability? And set that as a goal and go for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for a wonderful session, very engaging session. I enjoyed it personally, and I'm pretty sure each one of us enjoyed the session. Thanks so much again for all the audience for joining us. Please do sign up for our February session, which is on February 9th, where Bob Apt is going to talk about the similar topic, navigating challenges of enterprise level agile transformation. So remember to sign up for that session. So the floor is back to you, folks. If you have any questions, feel free to ask right now. Stephen is willing to stay for a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Stephen, for doing that. You're awesome.
Thank you. So I think we're officially closed. So we are respectful of people's time. But if you have any question or something you think, some interesting thought.
Yeah, this is the after party.
Yeah.
Yes.
I see a question from Karen in the